Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Are you recording?
Yeah. Yeah. I could just do like you, though, and just close it up and not worry about it in the afternoon. First of all, thank y'all for allowing myself and Brother Randall to help out with Brother Wurgis. Means a lot to be able to help take a little bit of the load off of him. In the afternoon when I'm teaching, I'm going to be doing something a little weird, possibly, to me. I mean, to me it's normal. I mean, it's just how I am. I kind of wanted to do this kind of like a BTC, Bible training class, instead of your typical sermon, because I'm not a pastor. So if you've got any questions, anything that you'd like me to research, look into for you, I know I've got a list already of 3 other questions after this when people heard I was doing this. Starting off, though, with one that my son brought to me, because my son, Christopher, has determined that he's writing himself a sermon. He wanted to step into that field at one point, and so he's studying, he's trying to put together, and he came to me with a question, because he said, what does it mean to sacrifice? He said he was working on his lesson, and he came across the word phileo. Well, technically he ran across Philadelphia, but the root of it is phileo. And when he was researching it, he came and he said, Dad, if phileo is brotherly love, why would you your brother? I'm like, Christopher, what do you mean? He said, well, it's a sacrificial love. Christopher, where did you come up with this? And last night, y'all, after I put all this together, after researching and looking, he finally showed me where he got it from. He got it from John 13:34 while I was looking it up, where it talked about
Brotherly love.
No, it talked about sacrificial love and laying down your life. Here's the thing, though. When you look in John 13:34, the word love is agape, not Philadelphia, not phileo. It's a different type of love, but because it's just translated love, when he was researching it and looking it up like a good little student, he looked it up in English. And in English, the answers get a little bit more confusing. So I did a simple explanation with him about sacrifice doesn't always mean somebody. I'm using his words, y'all. This is how he described it. So today, we're simply going to look at what is sacrifice and what does it mean for us today. Well, to start off, you've got to ask, why was sacrifice started?
It was a representation.
Okay, it was a representation because of sin. When we think of sacrifices, we think of the Old Testament because that's where it started. But the word there used is the word korban, which is any gift presented to the Lord at His sanctuary. Unlike terms that specify types, such as burnt, grain, sin, korban stresses the act of drawing near to God with something dedicated to Him. At its heart stands the principle that access to the Holy One requires a divinely appointed offering, whether that be for atonement, thanksgiving, fellowship, or consecration. Anybody know how many types of sacrifices there are in the Old Testament?
No.
I was close to 4.
There are 5 prescribed in the book of Leviticus that I could find. The first is the burnt offering, which was first recorded in Genesis 8:20. The burnt offering, or the go up in smoke, if you literally translate it, I did the same thing, Christopher. Go up in smoke offering. I think burnt offering is a more somber way of putting it.
Yes.
Was the complete destruction of the animal except for the hide in an effort to renew the relationship between holy God and sinful man, according to Leviticus chapters 1 and chapter 6. It was prescribed at specific times, but it was a voluntary offering that could be brought at any time. According to FIRM, which is the Fellowship of Israel-Related Ministries, the burnt offering is the first of the voluntary offerings which were made to express thanks, worship, devotion, and a commitment to God. But it was also an atonement for unintentional sin. Israel sacrificed bulls, birds, pigeons, or turtle doves, or rams without blemish. Their meat and bones were burnt completely, and the hide was given to the Levites to earn money by selling it. The third voluntary offering was the peace offering, and it involved the best and unblemished animal from the herd and various grain and bread offerings. It was a sacrifice to express thanksgiving, but it emphasized fellowship for them, as it was followed by a shared meal. So when somebody says, "Why do you share meals?" Well, that's our offering. That's our peace sacrifice. It was offered by a shared meal. It was fellowship for them. And unlike the previous offerings, the priest received pieces of the animal that were called the wave or the heave offerings. That's because these pieces of animal were lifted up and waved over the altar during the ceremony. And they were allowed to eat some of the offering to signify that God was providing for them. It was not what they were doing. It was fellowship with God and how God was providing. And yes, I'm using my hands a lot, Rachel. I can't help that. I use my hands. She's back there going like this. I'm going, you know. Then you had the vow offering and the free will offerings mentioned in the Hebrew scriptures. Those were all peace offerings. That's why I said there was only 5. Yes, they had a vow. Yes, they had a thanksgiving. Yes, they had all these other offerings, but they all come back to one of these 5. A common person could offer a female goat. A poor person would offer fine flour, but the young bull was offered on behalf of the congregation as a whole. Then you had, I skipped that. Sorry, y'all. Roll that back a little. The sin offering was mandatory, as it atoned for sins and cleansed from defilement. There were 5 possible elements for the sin offering, depending on the financial situation. The common person offered the female goat. The poor offered fine flour. A young bull was offered on behalf of the congregation as a whole. This is why I don't look up when I'm reading my notes, y'all. I lose my spot. The trespass offering was the second mandatory offering, and this sacrifice was specifically a ram. With the others, you had options, but when you got to the trespass offering, where you had sinned against someone specifically, there was a specific requirement. They offered trespass sacrifices as atonement for unintentional sins against someone else that required reimbursement and recompense. It was also a cleansing offering from defiling sins or physical illness and conditions. The fat portions, the kidney and the liver, were offered to God, and those offering the sacrifice ate the remainder of the ram outside the tabernacle. Okay, so why? Why did we have these offerings? There were 2 reasons, if you paid attention. For sins and for fellowship. Worship is what we would call it in today's terms. Leviticus 17:11 says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul." It was required that blood had to be spilt. So in that regards, Christophany was right. We see this eventually completed in Jesus, as Sister Tabby pointed out. This was something that would carry over. It was a forecoming of what was to be. In John 19:34 it says, "But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came out there blood and water." Hebrews 9:11 through 28. "But Christ, being come of a high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifieth to purify the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead. Otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission. It is therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with blood for others. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed unto man once to die, but after this the judgment, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. Hebrews 10:11 through 14 continues this thought. And every priest standeth daily ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God, from henceforth expecting till his enemies be made his footstool. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Why did they have the offerings? For sins. But did they cover their sins? No. It was to point them to the one who would, and Hebrews pointed out, he came, he did, it's done. But Ephesians 5:2 says, Walk in love as Christ also hath loved us, and hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling savor. So, well, this lets us see the why and the completion of the sacrifice. But it said we're supposed to walk in love as Christ has loved us and offered himself a sacrifice. Well, what happened to Christ? He died. He was killed. So, does it need to be a death? As my son asked. I mentioned at the start there were how many sacrifices?
5.
5. Oh, good job paying attention. I love it. How many did I talk about?
3.
4.
You skipped 2.
I skipped the second voluntary offering. The second voluntary offering is the grain offering, in which the worshiper offers up the fruit of the field in the form of a cake or baked bread. The grain offering was accompanied by a drink offering of wine. Grain and drink offerings expressed gratitude and thanksgiving, recognizing the Lord's favor, unmerited goodwill, and provision towards the person making the sacrifice. Priests could partake of a portion of this offering, but they had to eat it within the tabernacle. I don't know about y'all, but the closest thing to blood I've ever gotten from a fruit was a tomato. I don't know about y'all either. I've never killed a vegetable or a fruit. I've never succeeded in that. I know there is a religion out there, I had to study it when I was a kid, that believed carrots have souls. They believe you're actually killing a life when you're... No. This grain offering was the offering and sacrifice that did not require the death of a living creature or blood to be spilled. This is what allows us very first to see that a sacrifice does not require something. But we're going to come back to this one at the end. So if you are taking any notes on this, put a pin in it, because we're going to come back to this at the end. So there are 5 sacrifices. What was the ultimate fulfillment of those sacrifices?
Jesus.
Jesus is
No.
death. Because that was the sacrifice, and he rose again. But why do we not run around doing this still then?
Because it's already done.
Well, the sacrifice of the Old Testament weren't actually doing anything. So come on. I love it, Raven. I love that you're saying stuff right out there with this. Because that's exactly where my thought was, well, because it was finished. But the Old Testament sacrifices didn't do anything. They didn't finish anything either. Why don't we?
They were looking for it for
We would never have been disciples around here.
Okay. Well, what does Galatians 3:24 remind us? The law was our schoolmaster to do what?
To lead us to Christ.
Lead us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. Now, yes, verse 25 of Galatians 3 tells us that we are no longer under the schoolmaster. But why? If the point of the law was to draw people to see their need for Christ, why are we still doing this today to show people they have a need for Christ? I mean, if that was the purpose, was to show them they needed a Christ, why aren't we doing it to show people Christ still? I don't know about y'all. People still need Christ today, right?
Right.
Hebrews 10, 1 through 10 says, For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered, because that the worshippers once purged should have had no more conscience of sins. But in those sacrifices there is a remembrance again made of sins every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls of goats should take away sins. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he saith, Sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin thou hast had no pleasure. Then I said, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. Above when he said, Sacrifice and offering and burnt offerings and offering for sin thou wouldest not, neither hast pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. Then said he, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, that he may establish the second. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. So while we still have a need for Christ, we don't practice these 5 offerings of the Old Testament because of verse 9. That was all part of the First Testament, and the First Testament was done away with. That's why he said, of offerings and all that, I wouldn't have you do this. Because we're not under that anymore. We do not need a reminder of our sin because our sin's forgiven. We don't have to remember it. It's done. It's gone. These have been completed and taken care of. Even the Old Testament ones, according to chapter 10, verse 6, God had no pleasure or contentment in. They did not bridge the gap. We are under the sacrifice that was to come back then. But this does not mean we do not sacrifice today. Romans 12:1 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. We have a sacrifice to do. This gives us 2 words. We have sacrifice, or thusia, meaning, according to Helps, properly an offering, an official sacrifice prescribed by God, hence an offering the Lord accepts because it's offered on His terms. Okay, while 4 of the Old Testament sacrifices did involve death, 1 did not, and no, I'm not going back to that note yet. That makes it easier for us to understand. It is not a contradiction, then, to have the word living right before it, which, according to Helps, is to live and experience God's gift of life. If you're dying, you ain't living. And if you're living, well, you're going to get to that. So,
But you're not dead yet.
But you're not dead yet. So that brings us time to answer Christophery's question about sacrifice and living. Our first sacrifice is in Hebrews 13:15, which says, By Jesus, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is the fruit of our lips giving thanks to His name. Sunday is a time when we typically come to church. Are there other things we could be doing? Yes. Are there things we sometimes wish we could do because we're falling behind on tasks? Mm-hmm. Yet, what is it when you put aside what you want for what you should? A sacrifice. One of the ways you sacrificially live is to go and praise God and give thanks. We use prayer requests as a time to say needs, but God wants thanks as well as part of our sacrifice of praise. And this isn't just on Sundays and Tuesday and Wednesday night, depending on what time you meet. It's during the entire week you can praise and thank God. Hebrews 13:6 says, "But to do good and to communicate, forget not, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased." That word communicate is not talking. It does not mean run your mouth about God all day long. That would be a good thing, but that's not what he's saying here. It's koinonia, meaning what is shared in common as the basis of fellowship. Doing good to those around you in your life and sharing what you have. They say it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, but God says it's a human-help-human world. Do we all have the same abilities to help with? No. But what we do have, we can share. Do we want our own time? Yes, don't bother me the first hour when I wake up. I am not a morning person. Don't do that. Do I want to go help with this or that? Sure, but not really sometimes. Because I'm busy, and I like my time, and I'm jealous of my time. I don't want to give it away to somebody else. I want to rest. But that's not the right attitude. That's the truth, though. That's why it's a sacrifice. We give up for what we should do. Does it require burning or killing an animal? No. So why is it a sacrifice then? Because God prescribed it. Notice back there when I was talking about what it meant to sacrifice, it said, an offering the Lord accepts because it's offered on His terms. If He says do good, share, help people, then sharing and helping people is a sacrifice because He said do it. When He said praise is a sacrifice because He said it is. Philippians 4:18, but I have all and abound. I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. When we send money to help missionaries who are serving God the way God calls people to, that's what did God call it? A sacrifice that's acceptable to God. It's also well-pleasing, He said. Deuteronomy 10:12-13. And now, Israel, what doth the Lord thy God require thee but to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all His ways, and to love Him, and to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and His statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. Keep the commandment of the Lord. That does not mean the law in the sense of the 613 laws given to the Jews. I know I've read a few commentaries that thought they were. And I'd agree with that at that time. But in context for us, it said that the first law was done. It was fulfilled. We're under a New Testament. If God says it's right, it's right. If God says it's wrong, it's wrong. That's the testament for us. What does Matthew 28:20 say? Teach them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. We have commandments we are to follow. It's just not that 613. It's the commandments that have been given in the New Testament. And that's a whole nother lesson that the men's class have had to deal with. One more today, though. Micah 6:8. He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, to do justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly with thy God. So we have sacrifices today. Not for our sins, because that's been taken care of. But we have sacrifices to show our worship. As such, let's end with a thought I found on gotquestions.org. I found I love this website. They have some of the most neat little insights. The grain offering is described as a most holy part of the food offerings presented to the Lord, according to Leviticus 2:10. Grain offerings would often be presented after a burnt offering, which an animal sacrifice God required for the atonement of sin. Blood had to be shed for the remission of sins to take place, so a grain offering would not serve the same purpose as a burnt offering. Instead, the purpose of a grain offering was to worship God and acknowledge His provision. The burnt offering, which had strict regulations and could have nothing added to it, aptly represents the fact that we take no part in our atonement for our sin. The grain offering, however, could be personalized in its presentation. It was to be given out of a person's free will, just as our worship is to be given out of free will offering to God today. It's interesting to note that during the Israelites' 40 years of wilderness, wandering grain would have been scarce. It would have been hard to come by. This made grain offerings more costly and precious for the people to offer to God. Giving a grain offering in those circumstances represented the Israelites' complete dependence on God to provide for their needs each day. Jesus fulfilled the law, Matthew 5:17. And we no longer have to do sacrifices as they did in the Old Testament. But if the grain offering is similar to our offering of worship, it's interesting to consider. How much does our worship cost us today?